You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm excited to introduce you to our friend Lea-Ann Germinder. Lea-Ann is an accredited Public Relations Society of American Fellow and is in the final year of PhD studies at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. Her focus is strategic communication with an emphasis on responsible AI. She's president of Germinder Associates and publisher of GoodNewsForPets.com and has worked in veterinary medicine for several decades. Lea-Ann is known for launching Pet Need Dental Care 2, which created an oral care category for pets. Her recent work and research is focused on responsible AI in veterinary medicine. Lea-Ann, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and look forward to it.
So we like to talk about AI. Everybody's talking about AI, but someone who took an approach about responsible AI, that's new to me in our industry. Our industry is not known to do a lot of things responsibly. We don't have many regulations like human health. We don't have HIPAA compliance. This is why I was lucky to develop a software product and launch it without any approval like I would in the healthcare industry. And we're lucky that way, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that lack in regulations and potential safety around things that are to do with technology and even diagnostics and many other things. So tell us a little bit, what inspired you to work in this field? And let's just start there.
Well, in terms of working with veterinary medicine, it truly did start there with the launch of Pets Need Dental Care 2 with the AVMA and the Dental Society and the Dental College. And I decided to stay in veterinary because even though there's not a lot of regulation, there's wonderful people in veterinary medicine. So that was my start in veterinary medicine several decades ago. And how I got interested in responsible AI is that when I was taking my master's, ChatGPT was launched, and public relations practitioners were concerned about how PR folks were using ChatGPT to generate content. And so we very quickly came out with guidelines. And so I decided to get my PhD and focus on communications, and then kind of took a step back from veterinary medicine in large part. But then I needed a new set of research to do. And I decided, let me find out what's going on with veterinary medicine and artificial intelligence and responsible AI. And so that's how I came to do this particular study. And there's really a lot of commonalities in terms of the issues we're all facing with using AI responsibly.
It's really interesting, and I'm so grateful to have you here, Lea-Ann. We met, I guess, after AVMA and had a great chat as you were kind of doing some of your work towards your PhD, and I really enjoyed our interaction, and that's how this came to be today. So nice to have you here. But can you give us a broad overview of the industry and what you've learned, what's happening, what maybe should be happening?
Oh, in terms of the AI in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, in this category.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't know a better person to ask the question to.
Uh, well, let me say this responsible AI, I get asked a lot about that. So, responsible AI, the core tenets of it are you using AI safely, ethically, and legally compliant? And as you said, there's not a lot of regulations in veterinary medicine, but veterinaries do take the oath to do no harm, and there is a certain standard of care. At the same time, yes, we are all looking at this. What does it mean by responsible AI, and in particularly in veterinary medicine? And so I actually have just completed a research project on this, and actually I feel pretty good about it, to tell you the truth. I think that I looked at it from the standpoint of a theory called diffusion of innovations. It's a theory that basically looks at how fast is technology developed in a field and adopted in a field. And even though veterinary medicine is all over the map in terms of innovators and all the way to laggards, the folks that are the innovators are interested in how veterinary medicine will be implemented responsibly. And so there's just recent guidelines from the state boards in the US regarding the use of AI technologies. They're most concerned about diagnostic technology. And there's also several peer reviewed papers looking at this. And that was a big part of the discussion at this SAVI, the Symposium on Artificial Intelligence in Veterinary Medicine at Cornell that I just attended. So, what I would say is that to kind of sum this up, you're right that veterinary medicine doesn't have as many regulations as human medicine, but there is a concern to make sure that we, I guess, as a profession, that veterinary medicine moves forward responsibly.
So, you're bringing really good points. And I like those three categories: safely, ethically, and legally. But who defines that? I use, for example, in our clinics, Talkatoo, AI technology.
Thanks for the shout out.
Little plug for Sean. But are we doing it ethically, legally, and safely? I want to ask Sean now.
Absolutely.
So how do we define, and it stems from generating medical records, looking at the diagnostic imaging, looking at the blood work and urinalysis machines that use AI. Everything uses AI right now, and coming up with the differential diagnoses and all of those things. How do you put those into those three categories, especially if some of them are defined a little more softly, like the part of the ethically and safely? People can define that a little bit more themselves. Legally, I think there's a little more boundaries. So, how do you approach that?
Well, you're right. It is pretty interesting because let's start with the supposedly easy one, legal, right? There is no regulation of AI specifically, but there are state and local guidelines and that in terms of how you conduct business, if you will. Okay, so there's that aspect, but there is no, I'm going to talk to the US, is that there is no federal regulation in regards to AI for anything, right? It's a focus on innovation. And then safety in terms of diagnostic devices, those there are no pre-market regulations, but there are again some guidelines. So then you come to ethics, right? And veterinarians are medical professionals. So there does need to be some consensus on what does responsible AI mean in veterinary medicine. And so the research that I did said there are two things that veterinarians are in agreement about. One is that yes, AI definitely can improve the well being of the veterinarian and ultimately result in better healthcare for the pet if the caveat, if used responsibly. And again, how do we find responsible? And then the other agreement is, oh my gosh, we ought so much more education is needed, right? In terms of how the tools work, how you're going to implement it in your practice, and so on and so forth. But the interesting part about veterinary medicine versus public relations is that it is a medical profession, right? You do need to practice ethically and responsibly in terms of not harming the patient, if you will. So there is a certain responsibility, a higher bar, if you will, in veterinary medicine as a medical professional. And I found that to be the case. Now, where there is disagreement is what is the consensus? Like, for example, what is the consensus on the transparency of the AI tools? How much transparency should there be to the veterinarians? Because, these are proprietary tools. And then the second one that really surprised me that I think veterinary medicine needs to talk about is the disclosure to the pet owner. Sean and I talked about this. This is not really a big deal, right? Most of the participants said, there was one person that objected, an older patient that said, I don't know about that. But then halfway through the visit said, oh, that's okay for you to record. So I think that's a really interesting one of all of the research that I did, that the guidelines do say that you do need to disclose to the pet owner that you're using AI. And I think there's very easy ways to do that. But there's a certain fear of the veterinary profession that, oh, what's the pet owner going to think? That's a very interesting dynamic. But to answer your point, this really responsible AI in veterinary medicine, there really does need to come consensus because even though there's guardrails, there's still a lack of consensus. But isn't that veterinary medicine?
Oh yeah, you've encapsulated
Yeah.
whole profession and its history from inception. It's interesting. One of the things that one of the guardrails you said legal, right? And so that's an easy one for me to talk about because there's provinces and states in Canada and the US where we generally work, and some have two-party consent, have some have single-party consent, and there's the legal requirement to tell people that you're recording or not. And then there's also the ethical and the guidelines, which are contrary to one another. It's really kind of fascinating, but I like guidelines. I think they're helpful. And I think, one of the things that we've learned after helping, 5,000 plus veterinary professionals kind of get some time back in their day is that when you tell people that you're recording the conversation, it does two things. It establishes more trust in some cases, and it actually makes the pet parent be on better behavior because they're not going to then yell at you and do some things that they might not do or they might do if they knew that they were not being recorded. So it's a fascinating and emerging kind of area that is just kind of changing every day. So, what are some of those other changes that you've witnessed through that research project and writing your paper? Like, what are some of the things that people are worried about or excited about?
Oh gosh. Well, this also plays into your product because one of the things that people are worried about is this fear of what is it going to take to integrate AI into my practice. And, like I said, with your tool, I mean, try it. So that's a huge barrier in veterinary medicine. And when I was listening to one of your other podcasts, it was mentioned fear, right? Fear of the unknown. That's also a human trait, by the way, right? I mean, you talk about that, changing your methodology, changing a practice. But let me tell you, this is moving so, so fast. And you already know this that if you don't, the concern is, and this is of leadership too, is that you will be left behind, right? There's a period that we talked about, I talked about at Savvy, it was called the fear of Dr. Google, right? Veterinarians were worried about the pet owners are bringing in this stuff. What are we going to do, et cetera? Well, if you think Dr. Google was bad, wait till, yeah, just yesterday, Google announced all these changes. The tools are being, AI is being integrated into our daily lives. And so I'm sorry, but veterinarians are going to be left behind if they don't educate themselves about the AI, figure out how to integrate it into their practice. And there's plenty of help in order to do that.
I think at this age, people just need to go with the flow. If you're resisting this, you're going to be outdated so quickly. You're going to be the steam engine of our time that was just canceled, or the Kodak. It's, I frequently, when I go into the exam room, I ask people first, did you Google or did you chat GPT this already? Because I know where I start the conversation. I'm not going to start with, the very basics. And a lot of the time, people will come in and test if you know what you're talking about. So I want to know up front because everybody uses it. So it's an interesting time. And I always think that it's at some point, I'm always thinking that, I'm not worried about the owners looking everything through ChatGPT, but also vets because it is easier to practice this way. And so many times, I caught myself not remembering a certain differential diagnosis that wasn't in the top of my mind. So if you're not using it, you're going to be outdated so quickly right now. And it was interesting because just yesterday, one of our doctors posted the picture of Sarah Connor from Terminator having a cigarette thinking about AI. This is kind of where we are thinking about what AI is going to do to us. The question that I have is that, after someone listens, can we come up with the general guidelines? I'm thinking to implement a tool. Let's do another plug for Talkatoo. If I'm thinking to use something like Talkatoo, how do I know if this is a responsibly used AI for its purpose, or if I'm thinking about, the X-ray technology, if I'm thinking about diagnostic technology, what are the guidelines? If I look at it, is there a stamp of approval, or is there gonna be stamp of approval at some point where we know it's, AHA accredited hospital? We know what that means. So is there going to be a stamp of approval that says ethically, safely, and legally developed product?
Yeah, I love that.
Guys, you guys are doing so well. I think I'm going to leave and just let you guys keep eating the product.
Actually, that's where I'm gearing towards in my research is that in working with the dental experts, they came up with this is separate from my Pets Need Dental Care too, but they came up with the Veterinary Oral Health Council, which does endorse products. And I actually hope that's where no one mentioned that specifically, but I personally hope that that's where it's going. The veterinary profession needs something like that in order to bring some validity and credibility. Now, I believe that took several years in order to do that. It's kind of like the dental seal or the good housekeeping seal. I personally think that that's what's needed, but I think we're a little far from that right now. I do want to make a couple points, though, in addition, that number one, when in my research, this is not a generational thing, okay? It's not the young people or the old people that are laggards or innovators, what have you. I want to give a shout out to the older veterinarians that are right on board.
Like Ivan. Yeah, that's nice of you.
Thanks, man.
That's exactly right. And the second thing is the interesting part about disclosure and trust. And several veterinarians said to me, my pet owners trust me and I tell them about it and this is easier. And I think that whatever we do need to maintain that trust relationship. And you said something about, you ask, for example, the pet owner, okay, have you looked at ChatGPT or have you Googled this? And you're entering that relationship, even that individual veterinary clinic visit, from a point of trust. And one of my other major industry participants mentioned that said, we need to enter this conversation with the pet owner from the point of trust and credibility. And then the final point is, I just want to say that, yes, you do need to, in this piece of the discussion, yes, you do need to use AI, but you also need to have that human oversight, right? You can't just accept, and there is concern about that maybe the younger veterinarians, if you will, maybe the older ones will, use the chat GPT or, the AI and say, oh, okay, that's the recommendation and go on. Most of the veterinarians feel, no, this is a responsible veterinarian. But I think in terms of education, we need to remind people that veterinarians that yes, use the tools, but remain at the center of the treatment plan for the pet.
Leanne, I wanted to ask you just one more quick question because you started this whole conversation off with optimism for responsible AI in our field. What gave you that optimism?
So honestly, I think because of the ethics of the veterinarian, I think that I have worked with veterinarians for decades, and every discipline is going to have the outlier that, doesn't do the right thing. But fundamentally, I believe in the goodness of the veterinarians to do the right thing. And I think that that is going to dictate this. As long as they're educated and they understand what's going on with the tools, they will do the right thing. So that's me.
It's amazing. What a great place to put a pin in it. So we're finished. We ran through 20 minutes. I feel like we should have had an hour. Maybe have to come back, keep us posted on the great work that you're doing. But we like to end every episode with a couple questions. So first one is a YouTube video, a TED Talk, a book, something that you found inspiring or interesting that you'd like to share with our audience.
Okay, well, I'm very interested in the cross discipline discussion about AI ethics. And there's a book, Mark Kuckelberg, AI Ethics. He's a Belgian philosopher of technology. And he also just came out with a relatively newer book, Why AI Undermines Democracy and What to Do About It. So, yeah, heavy reading, but does believe in AI.
Even the title of philosopher of technology is a little new to me. This is
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that those two are that easily combined. The second question that we usually ask is there another innovator in our industry in your circles that you would recommend to this podcast?
I have to say, Parminder Basran, I apologize. I don't know if you've had him on the show, but he is a researcher at Cornell. He's one of the chairs of Savvy, and he comes from the medical field. So he's been in veterinary medicine about 5 years and is extremely optimistic on the promise of AI in veterinary medicine. So I would highly recommend him.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.